So how about them Epstein files? Eh? Where are we going to begin today? The abuse, the exploitation, Bobby Kotick having sex with Ghislaine Maxwell. How about we start with a song? I've been playing Tomodachi Life, that game you can make songs in. Oh, and before we crack on, have a content warning for talk of all the abuse and corruption and horror. And be aware that any jokes I may make today come from a place of pure, seething disgust.
Jeffrey's wife.
Oh, they're not actually married? Ah, fuck it, it's too good a punchline. Who were the girls, Bobby? Who were the girls, Bobby? Welp. Welp. Welp! I had a completely different script already written for publication last week, but suffice to say, certain developments altered my priorities. Not that Bobby Kotick's social circle cares much about developments, they prefer the developing. It was about 6 years ago when the CEO of Activision Blizzard was outed as a known associate of Jeffrey Epstein, once a billionaire paedophile, now a dead paedophile. The name appeared in the deceased sex trafficker's Little Black Book, as it was called, though the name was all we had to go on. I remember seeing it at the time and figured, you know, I'll be patient. The name alone isn't enough to risk a lawsuit with, but there had to be more, and at some point the truth would have to out. It really would be only a matter of time before the extent of the disgusting creature's depravity became known. I did leave some points for me to reference back to when the inevitable happened though, multiple times throughout 2019 whenever I talked about Activision's tax havens, financial manipulation, abusive worker treatment, and of course Kotick's own indiscretions. Like that time he threatened to have an employee murdered. I made a point of saying that such abhorrent behaviour was simply the stuff Activision wasn't trying to hide. That's the stuff Boulder's brass out in the open, and if they were okay with us knowing all that, just imagine how bad the stuff they didn't want us to know was. I figured at the time, hey, if nothing ever comes of this, then there's nothing wrong with a little speculating. The point I made was a fair enough one anyway. But if something did come of it, then I'd look pretty prescient, which is an image I've now undermined by admitting I was speculating. All that said, I don't think any of us could have imagined exactly how deep and how all-consumingly dark the skeleton closet of these warped billionaires was. Well, except for the people who tried to whistleblow and found themselves attacked, sued into oblivion, or had their publications killed by a Peter Thiel-backed Hulk Hogan. God, if only there had been warning signs. I have every confidence there's a lot more horror to learn before we get close to cracking the surface of just Bobby Kotick's own depravity, let alone what was going on in Nambla's VIP suite. But one thing is clear, Bobby Kotick, the man we all knew as the CEO of Activision Blizzard, is involved with a cabal of billionaire pedophiles and colluded with Jeffrey Epstein to exploit children via video games. That is a sentence I've had to write and then read out loud because it's 2026 and why fucking not at this point? I have to wonder, will being implicated in a billionaire's pedo club be more harmful to Bobby Kotick's dating life than people photoshopping devil horns onto his head? Also, Bobby, love, sorry, but I do feel I should ask you a personal question given the company you keep. Were your dates put off by the horns because they weren't old enough to know devils weren't real? That was a joke, that was a joke. In fairness, To Bobby, there's nothing yet that points to him dipping his wick in someone he shouldn't. Now, he's allegedly perfectly fine fucking someone who facilitates men dipping their wicks in people they shouldn't, organising paedophilia on a downright industrial level, allegedly considering he was allegedly fucking Ghislaine Maxwell, who in one leaked email playfully, and also allegedly, told him her heart was broken because he doesn't call anymore, prompting the response of, "Mend it together and bring that sexy body that goes with it out to my town. Ill ring." Yeah, my ring would be ill as well if I'd had Bobby Kotick up it. Never mind ill ring though, what about ill Steph? Like, fucking hell, I thought the biggest collective trauma we'd all have to share was gonna remain the COVID pandemic, but not even one as prescient as myself could predict we'd have to contend with the image of Bobby Kotick and Ghislaine Maxwell making the capitalist with two cracks.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, of course. Maybe they were just flirting. All I know is the psychic damage is very fucking real. Due to the vast amount of redaction in the files, the exact level of interaction between Kotick and Epstein is currently unknown. And weirdly, old Bobby boy isn't responding to requests for a statement. According to one email, the dead pedophile said, "Bobby Kotick came over last night, he's great." In another, Bobby himself mentions how he wished he could have stopped by the island. For legal reasons, I shall suggest that maybe this island was a different island than the paedophile island with which Jeffrey Epstein and his fellow billionaire paedophiles are primarily and paedophilically associated with. But it ain't a good look when you're talking to Jeffrey Epstein, of all people, about stopping by the island. It's a pretty safe bet you weren't talking about Tracy fucking Island.
We've been kept pretty busy since we set up this operation.
There were also mentions of unnamed girls between the two, including a Russian guest who apparently missed Bobby. There is a lot to unpack with the Epstein avalanche, and I don't intend to break the whole thing down because I don't want to break myself down, pouring through the correspondence of individuals so excessively and gleefully evil that they shouldn't be seen beyond the confines of the purely fictional. What's become clear, though, is that billionaires, as a general rule, don't just fuck the world, they love to fuck kids in particular. While they stoke the fires of a culture war they consolidate their power through, mega-wealthy perverts of every political stripe have all been as thick as the thieves they are. A vicious little gang of unhinged disaster capitalists, taking explicit enjoyment out of ruining the lives of anyone they deem lesser than themselves, which is anyone who isn't them. Because, as my friend and colleague Conrad Zimmerman said, class solidarity is real after all. It's just a shame it's the Epstein class. On some level, anyone with an ounce of reason long ago figured that the moneyed elites were all in bed together, but the sometimes literal nature of the bed, and the venomous, dripping evil of it all, it's just sobering as fuck to look at in pure black and white. From the 2008 financial crisis to the despicable gender-critical movement, to the radicalisation of nerds into nerdsies via shit like Gamergate, to Brexit and other worldwide messes, Jeffrey Epstein and his brood of crony capitalist abusers have been steering the world into hell with one hand on the wheel and the other hand on theirs and each other's dicks. I'm still trying to comprehend that I can't use a public bathroom in safety, that me and mine are under constant threat of being legislated out of public life because a literal island of paedophiles said we were the sketchy ones. In fact, they specifically wanted to provoke transphobia in the hopes it would make us unemployable, drive us all into sex work, and subsequently allow them to indulge their chaser proclivities. And they can go to fucking hell for Brexit and all. Are you telling me it's because of a literal island of paedophiles that I only get 3 beetroot in a packet instead of 4? Actually, as we'll discuss a little later on, it's more complicated and more simple than that. But yeah, these warmongering, hate-mongering, fear-mongering, child-mongering obscenities encased in flesh are the people Bobby Kotick hangs out with.
Objection. Counsel is mocking the witness.
Yes, I am.
Robert Kotick's part in this despicable play highlights exactly how granular this real and literal conspiracy went. Because no amount of control is ever enough for the truly megalomaniacal, Epstein sought to sink his claws into everybody's life via every medium possible, video games included. And the thing his pedo ring latched onto above all else was the very thing I dedicated an entire decade of my career trying to battle. For those who don't yet know, it is my vindicating yet sickening honour to tell you that microtransactions and other forms of video game monetization were envisioned by these sick men as a tool to prey upon and control children since almost the very beginning. Microtransactions have turned out to be one of the many mediums through which the wealthy can manipulate, indoctrinate and violate their victims. And Bobby fucking Kotick, that wretched, nauseating, slime-coated little
Skeleton warriors.
was colluding with billionaire paedophiles about how best to target children and the vulnerable via predatory monetization. A so-called inventor by the name of Pablos Holman was especially keen to leverage video games, literally saying, "I'm all in favour of indoctrinating kids into an economy." Holman and Kotick led the discussion about this indoctrination, so while it's been a catchy pitch for people to say Jeffrey Epstein created microtransactions, that's not the case. None of these men came up with the idea for microtransactions, obviously, but a paedophile monster, a kid inductor, and a man who oversaw years of abuse at Activision colluded on how to implement them and how to use games for the explicit goal of manipulating young people.
It's always three, isn't it?
And you know what, tacky as this bit may be seen, I'm going to take a little aside to make this about me very briefly, because we're talking about microtransactions, people. We're talking about predatory monetization, manipulative in-game economies, loot boxes, the stuff my critics endlessly saw as the molehill from which I was crafting my mountain, the subject I banged on and on and on about until people told me to shut the fuck up, the thing I literally said was designed by child predators. The stuff that people specifically tried to exonerate Activision Blizzard over. Because I still remember the heat I caught for calling out loot boxes in Overwatch. Because people didn't want to hear the argument that while Overwatch didn't invent loot boxes, it popularized them. It did for gambling mechanics what Resident Evil did for the survival horror genre. And now we know that not only was Activision Blizzard explicitly pushing to make this kind of predation the norm, the CEO was collaborating with nonces on it. So the buck was passed, eyes turned the other way. Overall, this isn't about me, and we're going to move on in a second, but amidst terrifyingly preposterous revelations about how our world really works, we all have to take what small elements of victory we goddamn can, and I am planting my flag on this one. I fucking told you!
Quite the grudge you're carrying.
One thing I want game industry and game media folk to take away from this in particular, one thing I hope they will, is that we cannot turn a blind eye to a problem before it's a problem, or rather before we think it's a problem, because a problem in the making is still a problem. I'm someone who actually likes to use the slippery slope argument, and I've defended doing so as being perfectly fine when the slope in question's been slathered in soap and Vaseline. Like there has to actually be some evidence, some past record, some prior. Basically, there's a way to do the slippery slope argument well, and there's a way to do it wrong, like say, when an island of literal paedophiles does it by projecting their own sexual interests onto a minority. When dealing with multi-billion-dollar companies headed up by stupid, greedy plutocrats, never assume they will stop. Never assume they will be satisfied. Never assume there's friction on their slopes. They want nothing short of complete control, complete domination. You know what we've always said here, right? Say it with me. They don't just want some of the money, they want all of the money. Same goes for power as well. When you're looking at someone who has more money than 99% of the world put together, more money than the human mind can comprehend, and they still want more, what on earth could make you think they'll ever have their fill? Microtransactions were never going to just be a little problem, something you could just ignore and they do no harm. That's not what the Epstein class wants, and it's not something they'd ever allow. Above all, they do harm. That's what they do, that's what they want. And now we have it in black and white, very poorly spelled text. Jeffrey Epstein saw a lot of potential in video games to control young minds. As well as Bobby Kotick, Epstein's files contain the names of Rockstar president Sam Houser and the CEO of the studio that gave us Mind's Eye, Leslie Benzies. All I'll say about Benzies is that he's denied the sexual assault allegations mentioned in the files, allegations that, according to those same files, Houser knew about. Epstein wrote, and the word wrote is doing a lot of work here, a load of rambling gibberish shit about the potential for games to condition people, something Bobby Boy was very receptive to. Yeah, let's look at some of this. Play Medal of Honor or Call of Duty and you will learn war history. Here's what I've been thinking. Video games are already great at teaching. If they don't assess your level and put an appropriate challenge right in front of you, the game fails. I'm not gonna do that voice the whole thing. Challenge too hard and you get frustrated and quit playing. Too easy and the game is no fun. That is exactly what a good teacher or tutor would do. Fundamentally, the thing that works is a one-to-one student-teacher ratio. Even if you have a shitty teacher or tutor, you will learn a lot because that person gets to know you and challenges you at your level. That doesn't scale, but computers do, so we have to use computers to replace teachers or at least augment them. And of course, we've since seen how regurgitative AI is being used to do just that, with terrible, misinformative results. Today's video games don't try to teach stuff we care about, well, except for shooting bad guys. Mate, why didn't you shoot your fucking self then? You had to wait to be murdered, you fucking coward. Anyway, he says the best scheme I've come up with so far is to use X Prize or something like it to co-opt the existing video game industry. Give out a prize to the game that comes up with the best way of teaching kids anything from a normal school curriculum. Let them pick whatever they want to teach, any grade level, and just incorporate it into their product. That's the way to get the most brains and the most users for the least money. You want to skip convincing educators and parents about this stuff and just go straight for the kids. Imagine you were looking at a door in a video game. It has some squiggly symbols printed on it. Little munchkins walk up to that door and say konnichiwa. The door opens and they are greeted by a hot princess with big tits and a thong. Well, if it had tits at all, you wouldn't be interested in it. The door closes in your face. You are going to fucking learn to read and pronounce kanji. Unleash that on 5th grade boys and Jesus Christ. And then next thing you know, you'll have an entire generation of bilingual kids speaking Japanese to each other behind the backs of their parents and teachers. Edutainment is for pussies. It doesn't work. Once kids catch on that you are trying to teach them something, they shut down. We have to keep the boobs and guns and profit. You see how much money video games are making these days? Fuck educational reform. We need educational subversion. What a fucking weirdo.
Take him out to Battery Park and hang him by the scrotum.
You'll note, throughout that, at no point has Epstein had an original idea. He says edutainment is for pussies, and his brilliant idea to supplant it is edutainment. That's his scheme. The dumb bitch. One thing I've been thinking about as I read some of this absolute drivel is how fucking worthless it all is when you sit down and actually look at the cockswill being spewed by all of these aggressively mediocre men. Their barely coherent emails don't actually say anything. Like, Bobby's response to Epstein's dribbling screed was, X Prize is a good idea, but key is real-world rewards. Learn to read. Earn cell phone minutes. iPhone credits. Virtual items in games. And there's the brilliant mind of Robert Kotick at work. The CEO of Activision Blizzard, the man heading up the most profitable third-party video game publisher in the world, couldn't come up with anything more creative than, prizes are a good idea, but what if the idea was prizes? As fucked up and scary as the power these men throw around is, when you look at how uncreative, how mediocre, how intellectually fucking useless they are, you can actually find a measure of ice-cold comfort from the fact that a lot of the exchanges are a bunch of utterly mundane, boring old men sucking each other's cocks over how clever and Machiavellian they are without them actually doing or thinking fucking anything. One thing I've said a lot over the past few years is that executives are intensely stupid people. People who can't make anything, can't learn anything, who can't do anything except exploit the creativity and labour of others to enrich themselves. That's a lot of the scheming between these dickheads. Like the AI garbage they love so much, their plans are just jumbled word salad derived from existing ideas and arranged in a way that might wow a dimwit. One of the very few jobs derivative AI could replace is that of an executive. And you need look no further for evidence than two of the pricks talking to each other. You'll get more insight out of a conversation between two fucking Furbies. I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that no, Jeffrey Epstein didn't inspire microtransactions as the popular stories become. Epstein lacked the capacity to inspire, just as Kotick lacked the ability to have ideas. They didn't create video game monetization. They did the only thing they know how to do. They took an existing idea and asked, what's in it for me? They worsen what exists. That's all they've ever done. That's what corruption does. It's the same story with every horrible event Epstein's rapist gang had a hand in. They didn't create the alt-right or Brexit or Gamergate or TERFs. What they did was co-opt, take advantage of, and exacerbate it all for the sake of money and control. They're billionaire predators. They don't create, they only appropriate. Aftermath's article on this had a great line while looking at emails between the paedophile sex trafficker and Steve Bannon when it suggested they were LARPing as kingmakers. So much of what these men do mirrors their sex lives in that they are opportunists first and foremost, who feel most potent when exploiting vulnerabilities and exerting control over others. Such is the way of the abuser. Don't get me wrong. They are dreadfully influential, and so much blame should be laid at their feet. It's angering and horrifying to see how deeply involved in all our lives these disgusting creatures were and still are. Their unhinged goals are creepy as fuck, and the fact they have a bottomless well of cash with which to achieve them should be taken incredibly seriously. At the same time, however, all these men are fucking pathetic. Sad, miserable, empty little perverts who are so rich they have nothing normal to strive for and have long ago resorted to depravity in order to get a thrill. They don't even like normal things that normal people enjoy. They derive no joy as we would understand it. Movies, video games, books, artwork, none of that inspires them. They see only commodities in all of that. It goes beyond art too. For these fuckers, basic human interaction is nothing but a tool to be used. The idea of raising a family, having loved ones, it's just another way to hold power and influence, and what a truly tragic existence that is. To be so fucking hollow that the notion of family has to be a profit deal to be seen as worth pursuing. Bobby Kotick enriched himself for decades off the back of video games, and he didn't even like them. He was a billionaire. He could have done anything, but he devoted much of his life to something he didn't give a flying fuck about because it would get him more money and power than he ever needed. To have so much of something that more of it would be actively fucking useless, and then just take more and more and more. While drafting this script, I originally suggested here that he could have devoted his life to something that fulfilled him, but on reflection, that's the single thing Kotick, with all his billions and billions of dollars, couldn't actually do. Nothing can fulfill these people. Too poisoned by privilege, stripped of the need to ever want anything, ever desire anything, ever work towards anything, they are thoroughly, comprehensively empty. That's why Epstein's emails so often dip into the realm of pure insanity. When you can afford to have everything it's reasonably possible to have, what is there left to want but the completely fucking unreasonable? This is what Bobby Kotick's always been. A terminally unsatisfied, eternally bored little animal rich to the point of poverty. He is a billionaire, the most pitiful of creatures, least deserving of pity. He can blame the devil horn photoshops for him having trouble finding a woman all day long, but his struggles with dating speaks more to the reasons the horns were photoshopped in the first place. Can someone like him ever relate to a real woman? He has common ground with nobody except, well, Jeffrey Epstein, a sex trafficking pedo. Bobby, I'd say you'll never see an ineffectual and barely watched video like this one, but your ilk are so fucking small, so fucking petty, you actually might see it and might care. So let me just say, on the off chance you ever hear these words, Bobby, I actually do feel sorry for you. You're an evil monstrosity, an aberration of society, and I will be happy when you're in the ground, but god damn, will your death be a mercy for yourself as much as everybody else? On some level, you know it too. You know how much of your insides have been gnawed away, and you had to feel every fucking bite. You poor, poor man. More importantly, you disgusting, despicable cunt. The billionaire cannot make, the billionaire cannot imagine, the billionaire can only masturbate its ego in a big group wank with other self-loving billionaires before they all go off to recreate scenes out of the 120 Days of Sodom because they're too desensitized to come to anything else. I'll leave you one last thought about Bobby for now. He parachuted out of the game industry as one of the most hated men in the business, with a legacy of greed that unequivocally worsened the medium, and somehow, a legacy that shit has been further tarnished. That's funny to me. Okay, I can't stomach thinking about this any longer. Thank God for me, and this is Hi Steph saying bye, Steph. And fuck you, Bobby.